Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of character analysis. Well, this is a new round of character analysis. We're going to be doing Red Dead Redemption. So kind of like how we did Black Ops 1 and 2, we're going to be doing Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. Now, each character that I talk about, I mean, only if they're in Red Dead 2. So, like, today we're going to be doing John Marston. So, pretty much if they're in, like, the first Red Dead and the second Red Dead, I'm just, like, today we're going to be doing John Marston. So, I'm going to be talking about him in Red Dead 1 and Red Dead 2. So, since Red Dead 1 is a prequel, I'll be doing his backstory in Red Dead 1, and then I'm going to be talking about the original Red Dead Redemption since it's afterwards. So, I'm going to be kind of going, like, straightforward here. Um, and yeah, sorry, I said a new character analysis would come out. It's supposed to come out like last week or so, a little bit after the Black Ops character analysis, but just took some time. That's why gameplay came out yesterday. It took me some time to have to actually plan this character analysis because I was planning out some things, so that's why I was kind of delayed. But we're here now, and we're going to be getting it off the Red Dead wiki. So kind of like the COD wiki. It's kind of like and there's like a wiki for like everything. So this is from the Red Dead wiki, and it is a great site. I've read off of it tons of other times before I even started doing any character analysis, so I already know it's a great site. So it's quite a long. It's very organized here. It's quite a long backstory, but we're just going to be jumping right into the events of Red Dead 2. So in the Coulter chapter, so in their attempt to escape the Pinkertons, the Van Rillen gang continue to flee north and end up caught in a snowstorm on the mountains of Ambrino. I think that's how you say that mountain. Now, while the rest of the gang look for shelter, John and Mike are sent scouting for additional shelter and supplies. Eventually, Abigail becomes concerned when John has not returned after 2 days. She pleads Arthur to find him, and after Hosea steps in, Arthur and Javier set out to find John. And by the way, we will be doing Arthur. I'm just going to save him for a little bit later, because he is a bigger character. So that'll be a bigger character analysis episode. So they eventually managed to track him down and find up in the mountains, badly injured and his horse killed. He revealed that he had gotten lost or so a day or prior, ending up on a cliff near the peak of the mountain after being attacked by wolves. That badly lacerated his right cheek and nose, giving him his iconic scars. They proceed to bring him back to safety, although Morgan is forced to fend off several wolves that had to come after the trio, while Squala carried Marston on his horse. Now, once they return to Coulter, Abigail scolds Marston for his actions, and he is left to recover during the rest of their stay. At some point afterwards, John asks Dutch if he could join the train robbery crew, but Dutch refuses and tells John that he needs to rest and heal. During the ride out of the mountains, John is being seen loaded up into a stretcher onto a wagon, with his face still heavily covered in bandages and badly injured. And then we're just going to go into the Horseshoe Overlook chapter. So this is like the second chapter in Red Dead 2. After recovering from his injuries, John, along with Arthur and Bill, assaults the O'Driscoll hideout at Six Point Cabin using the information given by Kieran Duffy. Former member of the O'Driscolls, John takes Kieran on his horse and they arrive at a forested area outside of the camp. The three take out some O'Driscolls silently before a shootout ensues. The three emerge victorious, and after Kieran saves Arthur's life, John and Bill convince Arthur to let him stay, and the two take him back to camp. Now, John, Arthur, and Charles, before being joined by Sean, rob a train through Scarlet Meadows. They manage to steal a Cornwall wagon and put it on the tracks to force the train to stop. During the robbery, John deals with the passengers, which is actually a very classic mission with John, in my opinion. Um, Carrying a loot bag for them to put their valuables in. However, the law shows up quickly, prompting suspicion from John, although they still manage to make off with the money. John and Arthur go to steal a herd of sheep at some point afterwards to sell them at Valentine auction, and then when they go to the nearby saloon to drink after the success, where Dutch and Strauss show up. Strauss and John go outside where they're captured and held hostage by Leviticus Cornwall and his hired guns. Arthur and Dutch rescue them before fighting their way out of Valentine, then they promptly pick up camp and leave. Or pack up camp, excuse me. And then the Clemens Point chapter. Now, there's like a bunch of chapters. It does go over a lot. Now, I'm only going to be going over like more or less the important points. Now, there's good backstory to it if you guys want to go on the Red Dead Wiki and read. I'm more just doing like more of the important parts of all of it. So, because it is a lot, it will take a lot to read all of it. So, this is in the Clemens Point chapter. So John, Javier, and Arthur make a deal with the Greys in which they will steal the Braithwaite's prized horses and then sell them for $5,000, and then the three of them talk their way into the grounds before subduing the stable hand and stealing the horses. John takes a lead during the escape until they sell them to the meager 700 for a meager $700, which they pretty much got scammed for that. Now, after Jack is kidnapped by the Braithwaites, John takes part in his assault against the Braithwaite Manor and hopes for taking back his son. After his son is not at the manor, he grows furious. After the Pinkertons find out that the location of the gang's camp, John and Arthur go to Shady Belle in order to clear out any Lemoyne raiders so that the gang may set up a new camp there. After eliminating a few of the remnants, John and Arthur dump the bodies in the swamp around the jetty, and then John goes and directs the rest of the gang back to the camp. Now, this is the Saint Denis chapter. John, Arthur, and Dutch go to Angelo Bronte's manor after learning that Catherine Braithwaite that he is holding from the Jack hostage. In exchange for Jack being returned to them, Arthur and John are sent to deal with a group of grave robbers in the city's cemetery. The duo kill the grave robbers, although the police arrive at the cemetery after hearing gunshots, forcing John and Arthur to manage to sneak out of the cemetery and evade them. When they return to Bronte's mansion, Dutch is there waiting for them along with Jack. Then they head back to camp. And then the gang throw a party to celebrate Jack's return. Now, John's relationship with Dutch begins to deteriorate during this chapter as Dutch believes that John is becoming too close to his family and that Abigail is turning John against him. Vanderlinde also believes that John is losing faith in him, and in return, John begins challenging some of Dutch's decisions. Later, John accompanies some of the gang members, storming Bronte's mansion in revenge for Bronte setting up Dutch. Inside the house, John comes across Bronte and knocks him unconscious with a punch to the face. John witnesses Bronte being drowned by Dutch and fed to an alligator, which he is shocked by. During the failed bank robbery in Saint Denis, soon afterwards, John gets captured and sent to Sisika Penitentiary, where he is incarcerated, and pretty much Arthur and Sadie, go to save them. So, and then this is pretty much where it's going to get, this is where it's the Beaver Hollow chapter, so this is where it gets, starts to get pretty bad. So after Dutch and 4 others travel back from Guarma, Arthur and Sadie and Adler scout out the penitentiary using a hot air balloon and later manage to bust John out of the prison, as I already mentioned. And then he comes back to camp, and actually Dutch does, and I'm not reading off the script here, actually Dutch does not like him coming back against his better wishes because he said, it draws attention to him that they don't need. On orders from Dutch, John and Arthur blow up the Bacchus Bridge with the stolen dynamite for the train robbery. During this operation, Arthur convinces John that he and his family should run away from the crumbling gang once they have enough money. The two begin making plans, and John informs Arthur that Abigail knows where the gang's money stash is. The feeling that they need to get out is escalated even more as Dutch descends into madness. In addition to becoming increasingly influenced and corrupted by Micah, who acts like he's the new right-hand man, John is later present with the rest of the Vanderlyn gang during the battle against the U.S. Army at the oil fields, although he plays a minimal part in it. So yeah, and then the bridge scene, that's also a very classic scene with John, especially with John and Arthur for their character development, so that's very good. Now John takes part in the final robbery of the Vanderlyn gang, which involves robbing an army payroll from the train when upcoming and burning the train carriage. John gets shot in the shoulder by a train guard and falls off the train. Dutch goes back to save him, but ultimately decides to leave John to die. After the robbery, John is presumed dead by the rest of the gang. When rescuing Abigail, who had been captured by Pinkertons, Arthur and Sadie learn from Agent Milton that Micah had betrayed the gang after he'd given information to the Pinkertons since the gang's return to Guarma. Landing while he goes to camp in order to confront Micah during a standoff between Micah and Arthur about the former being a traitor. John makes a shocking return, still injured, claiming that Dutch left him to die. John and Susan Grimshaw side with Arthur, while the rest of his gang sides with Micah. Susan threatens Micah at gunpoint, but he kills her when she's distracted by the news of the Pinkertons' arrival. Dutch then draws his revolvers and demands to know who is with him and who is betraying him, ultimately leading to the gang untying behind him and against Arthur and John, holding the two at gunpoint. Before the pair can be gunned down by the others, the standoff is interrupted by Pinkerton. John and Arthur flee the area using the caves underneath the camp. Once they get out of the caves and try to escape through the forest, Arthur tells John that Micah was the rat and his family are safe at Copperhead Landing. Then they are forced to run while being pursued by Dutch, Micah, and the others, declaring that the pair are traitors after John and Arthur outrun their pursuers. Their horses are shot under them, and it becomes clear that the whole area has been surrounded by Pinkertons, and their chances of getting out alive are slim. And Arthur has to make a decision, and the following set of events will play on the player's choice. It pretty much depends. So if Arthur helps John to escape, Arthur decides to ensure that John will get back to his family at all costs, so the two decide to traverse the mountains with the Pinkertons on their tail. John and Arthur fight their way to the top of the mountain until Arthur decides due to his illness he can't go on. So he suggests that he stays behind and distracts the Pinkertons while John continues on. Arthur gives John being his brother and reluctantly continues on his way to his family while Arthur fights off the Pinkertons alone, and then Arthur gives John his hat and satchel. And then for the second one, pretty much Arthur just goes back for the money, and then John runs up the mountain back to his family. We don't really see too much of John if you decide to take the money, so that's pretty much, it's not the best ending you could go for. It's a low honor ending, so, it's pretty much up to the player. So either way, John manages to escape and reunite with his family, along with Sadie, Tilly at Copperhead Landing. While Arthur dies either from his tuberculosis or being killed by Micah, John and his family plan to live an honest life after leaving the gang. Wishing to buy some land, they moved to the Yukon soon afterward to take part in the gold rush, but they didn't make much from it. Sadie and John are also vowed one day to kill Micah for his treachery should they ever found him. And this is pretty much the prologue, and this is more or less how John gets set up. He goes to Pronghorn Ranch to work as an honest man and pretty much making an honest dollar. Then eventually Abigail leaves him, and then he goes on to build the house with Uncle and Charles, who he also finds. And the prologue is actually probably one of the best parts of the story, in my opinion. I personally really like the prologue when you play it, and kind of how it ends the game. So I personally really like it, so you guys kind of know what happens. So then he goes on to build Beecher's Hope and then lives happily ever after until the events of Red Dead Redemption, which is what we're going to move on to now. So if you guys kind of see how I do Red Dead 2 first, and this is going to be with any characters who are in the first Red Dead and the second Red Dead, which there aren't very many. So, yes. So we're going to do Red Dead 2 first, and then Red Dead Redemption, which is what we're doing now. And, that's just with the characters in the two games. So, in New Austin, 4 years later, the old American West is dying in 1911, encroaching technological advances such as railroads, telegram offices, and stronger law enforcement begin to interrogate themselves into Western society. The federal government wants the Bureau of Investigation to aid in the process of civilizing. Once the Bureau of Investigation, rigged and with gangs running wild and unchallenged, especially that of Bill Williamson and Dutch Vanderlyn. Not wanting to make martyrs out of them, Ross decides to use an ex-associate of Williamson's that the Bureau had been watching to hunt him down. Former outlaw John Marston by kidnapping John's wife and son. Ross forces him to comply, thus John is forced to roam the frontier once again to protect his family, which is pretty much the, that went on to happen after the prologue in Red Dead Redemption 2. So John arrives in Blackwater on the ferry in Morning Star and is escorted by Edgar Ross and Archer Fordham through town to be sent off the train in Armadillo. Once there, John finds a guide named Jake, hired by the local marshal in the saloon. The talkative guide questions Martian about his motives, but then gets no answers in return. He leads John to the walls of Fort Mercer, the main hideout of the Williamson gang, and confronting his old friend, Martian tries to reason with him, with Williamson and giving up peacefully. But Williamson taunts John for his vocabulary, proudly proclaiming that he is now in charge of his own gang. John reaches for his revolver but gets shot in the lower right torso by one of Bill Williamson's men. So I'm going to save some of this, particularly for the Red Dead 1 character analysis that I'm going to do, because I'm going to do it it's going to take a long character analysis, because my plan is I'm going to do Red Dead 1 characters only in Red Dead 1, and then Red Dead 2 characters only in Red Dead 2. And if there's repeating characters, I'm going to mix them up. So now that I'm going to do the first main characters and a couple side characters. So Bonnie, Bonnie McFarlane, I'm going to save some of it for her character analysis, and then Bill's character analysis. I'm going to save some of it because I'm sure it's already going. I'm going to spare you some of it because I'm sure it's already going to go over it when I make the character analysis. So after suffering through the night and eventually passing out on the side of the road, Bonnie McFarlane and her ranch hand Amos find John and take him to the Nathaniel Johnson's doctor's office in Armadillo after treating his wounds. Bonnie provides John with lodging, food, and drink on the condition he helps her around the ranch. John works off his debt of $15 and his life to Bonnie after her father Drew McFarlane by doing various ranch jobs as night patrol, cattle herding, and horse taming, and etc. However, Williamson finds out that John has survived and orders his gang to set the barn on fire, and then John rescues the trapped horses and Bonnie promises to sell him some cattle when he settles on his ranch again. After assisting U.S. Marshal Lee Johnson with various jobs around Armadillo, John and the Marshal begin to plan an assault on the fort. To gather a posse and the necessary resources to conduct and attack John, works with the snake oil salesman Nigel West Dickens, through him Irish and Seth Briers, which we are going to go through them in feature character analysis. There's so many characters in this game I want to go through, so you guys got to look forward to that. However, the plans are temporarily delayed when Bonnie McFarlane is kidnapped, to which John volunteers to help Marshal Johnson save her from being hanged. After saving Bonnie, John, and allies carry out an assault on Fort Mercer, using a Trojan horse strategy by sneaking John and a Gatling gun inside the fort in Dickens' wagon. West Dickens gives them a lecture about what is going on inside in his miracle wagon, before rapping sharply on the side of the wagon to signal John, who shows himself and kills most of the outlaws while assisting the fort. However, after the battle, the crew discovered that Williamson had fled the previous morning and went into exile in the Mexican province of Nuevo Progreso, and he hangs out with hangs out with Javier Escuela. That wasn't the word. It wasn't hangs out, but he pretty much hides out with him. Now, Iris escorts John south of the border to Mexican province. Nueva Preso, where he meets the region's provincial governor, Colonel Allende. Oh, sorry, Colonel Allende. I bombed that name. And his subordinate right-hand man, Captain DeSanta, which we will be going over them. Also forced to work with them to gain information on Williamson and Escuela. At the same time, John encounters the aging famed gunslinger Landon Ricketts, which we're also going to go over him. Like I said, so many people. Who teaches him new gunfighting skills and commits raids on the Mexican army. Marston also, aids Abraham Reyes and Luis Fortuna, which we're also going to talk about them. Two lower revolutionaries working to overthrow Allende and his president, General Sanchez. With numerous revolutionary attacks, he attempts to extract any information possible from both Allende and Reyes regarding the whereabouts of Williamson and Escuela. However, Allende, aware of John's loyalties, betrays John and has his men attempt to kill him. However, Reyes and his rebels arrive in time and rescue John before he's executed. John kills Captain Espinoza in the ensuing battle and sides with Reyes in the revolution. After Captain DeSantis dealt with, John participates in an attack on El Presidio. Marston confronts Javier and holds him at gunpoint, although Javier manages to escape. Marston pursues him, and Javier is either killed or captured by John in the ensuing struggle. Dead or alive, Javier is handed over to the newly arrived agents, Edgar Ross and Archer Fordham. Eventually, the rebels lead an attack on Allende's villa. In the midst of the bloodshed, Luisa is gunned down by Allende's men, although she is avenged by Raul Zubida, and two of his soldiers are killed by John in retaliation. As the rebels storm the villa, Allende and Williamson were also seen seeking protection from the army and make their escape. They also subsequently hunted down and killed by Marston and Reyes, allowing the rebels to take over Nueva Preso and make plans to march on Mexico's capital. Continuing the revolution with Williamson dead, John is required to head back to Blackwater in America to meet with the agents Ross and Fordham once again. Though Marston's business with Williamson and Escuela is over, Ross tells him that he needs to subdue Dutch Vanderlyn, the former leader of the Vanderlyn gang, if he wishes to get his family back. John, along with Ross, Fordham, and other bureau agents, engage in several skirmishes with Dutch and his gang of natives across West Elizabeth, before to capture or kill Vanderlyn. Marston also works with incompetent Yale professor Harold McDougall and native informant Nestas. I think it's Nestas. I don't know if you say it's Nastus or Nestas. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say Nestas, which is actually how one of them say it in the game, actually. So, in tracking Dutch down, eventually John and the Bureau of Investigation join forces with the American Army in ambushing Dutch's hideout, and he confronts Dutch himself, who warns John that the government will find a new monster to justify their pay rather than dying or being taken captive by John. Dutch chooses to commit suicide by falling off of a cliff, which we'll talk about Dutch, of course. One of the bigger characters about him in Red Dead 1 and 2. Now, however, as per Dutch's warning, Edgar Ross double-crosses John. He, along with the Bureau of the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marshals, launch an attack on the Marston Ranch. Uncle is killed during the shootout, while John and his son continue holding off the attackers. John tells Abigail and Jack to run while he stays behind the barn and defend them, knowing that the chances of survival of John are slim. Abigail and John seal their love with a passionate kiss. The former rides off. In the end, John realizes that the only way to save his family from the government's crosshairs is to lay down his life. John sacrifices in his last stand against Ross and his men. After exiting the barn and standing before a large firing squad, he draws his pistol and takes out as many men as he can before they can open fire on him. Still standing, breathing harshly, and with multiple bullet wounds on the body, he drops his revolver, falls to his knees, and then eventually collapses back to the ground. As Ross watches Marston dying, he callously lights a cigar, satisfied with knowing that the final member of the Vanderlyn gang is dead. Before departing with his men, Abigail and Jack, presumably upon hearing a sudden ceasefire, return to find John's body in a pool of blood, peppered with bullet holes. They bury him on top of the hill overlooking the ranch next to Uncle. His grave is inscribed by "Blessed are the peacemakers." And then, of course, there is the epilogue where Jack just goes off and avenges his father, and he kills Agent Edgar Ross. And that's only if you choose to. But that's the way I see it as the proper ending of Red Dead Redemption. So I always choose to do that every time I play the game. And that's pretty much it. Well, of course, it was a very long article, and I only went over the more important points that it went over. So I also, like I said, did skip over some because some of there were other characters that we're going to do in the future character analysis, and it would probably just pretty much be going over the same thing. So I want to start off the series with John because he's one of the first characters we could play as, like in the whole Red Dead series. So it's pretty much, it's going to be a big character analysis because there's so much characters I want to talk about in both games. Like I said, it's going to be Black Ops 1 and 2, kind of like Black Ops 1 and 2, I should say. And so we're going to do Red Dead 2 and kind of like mix it up a little bit with the returning characters and stuff. So, um, we'll still have to see how it goes. So pretty much I'm going to do Red Dead first. So I'm going to do all the Red Dead 1 characters, and if there's Red Dead, if the Red Dead 1 characters are in Red Dead 2, then I'll talk about them in both games. And then if there's just one um, Red Dead character, in the first game, of course I'll only talk about them. If it makes sense. I hope it makes sense. Just, like I said, kind of reflected on as if it's like Black Ops 2. So kind of reflected on that. And that's pretty much it. There is actually an Undead Nightmare article here, but I figured since Undead Nightmare isn't canon, then I'm not really going to talk about that. It probably is fun to talk about, but I'm just going to really stick to the main story. That'll pretty much do it for our new character analysis. I got big plans for this Red Dead character analysis, so hopefully you guys enjoy it. That's pretty much it. So make sure to subscribe for more content, like the video, all the good stuff. Discord, Twitch, Instagram, links in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next character analysis. Like I said, I think you guys are really going to enjoy this, though. So leave a comment down below what you guys think of this Red Dead character analysis so far, just based off the first episode. And, yeah, more to come. I'll see you guys in the next video.